Within just 12 months of Bitcoin ETFs hitting the market, they attracted over $120 billion. Now, the top ETF IBIT now holds $70 billion alone, but today, Solana's market cap only sits at around $78 billion, despite the immense bullish momentum from institutions and Treasury vehicles and the 90% Solana ETF approval odds. So the real question is, will an ETF approval send Solana to $2,500 or a 5x by year end, as some of our experts have predicted? Okay, now guesstimating ETF inflows can be sticky, and we saw how differently the markets reacted to BTC and ETH approvals. When Bitcoin spot ETF finally got the green light in January last year, BTC pumped over 140% in less than a year, and the largest Bitcoin ETF IBIT blew through $70 billion in just under a year of trading. That means that IBIT is now the fastest ETF to ever reach that mark in such a short period. And just like that, once the institutions started piling billions in, we saw that BTC wasn't just crypto or some risky exotic concept anymore, it became a widely discussed Wall Street asset as well. All signs are now pointing to Solana being next in line with 90% approval odds. Today, Bloomberg analyst Eric Balchunas predicts that ETF inflows could reach $35 trillion by 2035, with Bitcoin and digital assets like Solana playing a significant role in this. So what does that mean for prices?
Punchline is we think Solana has a really good chance to flip Ethereum this cycle.
In a complete bubble cycle, I think it can go above 2,000. In a short stunted cycle, 750.
Solana, my price target is 2,500.
Okay, before you panic, here's why some of those price targets could be actually less outlandish than they seem at first sight. We now have 7 ETF applications for Solana that have been filed and updated with the SEC, including heavy hitters from Fidelity and VanEck to Franklin Templeton and Grayscale. Even CoinShares has entered the race, and these filings aren't happening simultaneously in a coordinated fashion just for fun. No, they're happening because the SEC has been in open dialogue, meaning approvals look more likely than ever before. And here's the real Trojan horse, because VanEck's Solana ETF called VSOL is now listed on DTCC as of just yesterday. And while this is not an SEC approval sign yet, it is a clear sign that VanEck is preparing, which is exactly what we saw around the BTC and ETH ETF approvals as VanEck prepared for a green light last year. Now, if you've been following Solana Floor or you're subscribed to this channel, you will know that the SEC has delayed filings in the past. James Seyfarth says that he expected delays, but that the SEC being in open discussion around Solana staking ETFs is a very positive sign. We also have Bloomberg analyst Eric Balchunas reminding us that we saw similar delays with ETH approvals back in July, with the SEC quote-unquote taking their sweet-ass time. And here's another banger from yesterday. The Genius Act for stablecoin regulation has finally been passed, and let's listen to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent explaining just how differently the world's largest economy now thinks of digital assets compared to the previous administration.
That seems to be a threat to the dollar, doesn't it?
I think it's the opposite.
Oh, really?
I think stable coins could reinforce dollar supremacy.
So whichever way you look at this, the sheer amount of activity is nothing short of regulators paving the way for healthy adoption, and an institutional-sized bet on Solana becoming a core financial rail for the next generation of capital markets. Because Sol now stands at a crucial crossroads in its maturity. ETF approvals in Canada, institutional treasury vehicles piling in with hundreds of millions of dollars, and of course, the fact that institutional staking is gaining traction with Marinade leading the way. Here's Marinade's Hadley Stern breaking down why this is also a critical step along that journey.
We're very interested, and we have conversations underway with ETF manufacturers who want to create Solana staking ETFs. And we'll use companies like Marinade, and we have a little bit of a different model that's unique that we think is going to really resonate. So looking to talk to any ETF manufacturer out there, but also family offices, high net worth individuals who want to learn more about Solana. Solana staking, unlike Ethereum, you earn anywhere from something like 8 to 10%. And one of the things we really strive to get across in the staking business is that staking is not like lending or a complicated financial services product. It's a protocol activity. So if you own Solana, you should stake it. And if you stake it, you should stake it with Marinade.
Now, you'll be pleased to hear that this has already happened in Canada's TSX, where Solana ETFs are active, and 3iQ's Solana staking ETF has already amassed 190 million Canadian dollars within a month of launch. But even more impressive, is that this very same staking-enabled Solana ETF, called SolQ, commands a massive 87.6% share of that, which is a crystal clear sign that investors prefer yield-generating ETF structures. Here's Eric Balchunas chatting with Wall Street Bet's favorite hedge fund manager Cathie Wood about the bull case for Solana and why ETPs, including staking ETFs, which we just heard about, are going to be crucial going forward.
Solana has been very interesting. It is what I would call anti-fragile in that it is really one of the few protocols that has gone through a full market cycle. And not only that, in July of 24, the number of new developers developing to the Solana ecosystem surpassed that of Ethereum and became the highest.
Do you anticipate a spot Solana ETF will, again, bring in new investors? How successful do you think it would be relative to those other coins?
Well, I think one of the reasons the Ether ETF has been less successful than people expected is our regulators did not allow staking. We were one of the first to gain access to both Ether and Solana ETFs through 3iQ in Canada because they allow staking. So I think the answer to your question is, will our regulators allow staking, right? For Ether, they did not. And I think that was one of the problems.
And speaking of institutional appetite for Sol, we have Sol Strategies, DeFi Dev Corp, and Upexi, which have collectively purchased Sol to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, with a clear intention to acquire more as time goes on. Now, if you're keen to track these inflows, we are building a Solana Floor Treasury tracker, so you can of course subscribe to the channel for frequent updates, and we also have Data Insights newsletter, where you can find all sorts of really useful charts and data for your own research. We briefly heard from Dan Kang earlier, who's head of investor relations at DeFi Dev Corp, another leading Solana treasury vehicle. This is his quick take on why exactly Solana can flip Ethereum sooner than we think.
It just offers the most compelling combination of performance, price upside, yield, real on-chain usage. It's faster and cheaper than ETH. It powers a wide range of sectors, from DePIN to meme coins, as we previously mentioned. And then obviously has the native yield component, which is really important. So look, Bitcoin is the best store of value on earth, but to the extent that you wanted to launch a Bitcoin treasury vehicle today, you've got to compete with the, huge giant that is MicroStrategy. And to our benefit, at least with Solana, there is no runaway clear leading player today, which we think, opens up the field, and we intend to become that leader.
Now, here's where things start to get a bit sticky. In light of the recent escalation between Iran and Israel, analysts expect that the US could be closer to getting involved. However, ETF inflows seem to be continuing unfazed. So to make sense of this, I spoke with Stefan Rust, who's been chatting with experts like Anthony Scarramuci, who was once, of course, the White House communications director during Donald Trump's first term. Stefan, you've been speaking to people like this who have a really solid macro understanding and also political experience, even directly in the White House. From those conversations, what is the feeling that you get about this discrepancy, this disconnect between the bullish momentum that we're seeing in the crypto industry and this geopolitical tension that's happening right now? Does it make sense to you, or is it just business as usual?
No, it makes sense. People are looking for a safe haven. They find it in gold. Gold is at an all-time high. Crypto, Bitcoin is the new gold. And people are putting their money into Bitcoin right now because they see that as the new gold. It's limited in supply. It's just an asset. It's nothing else. They're starting to allocate bigger portions of their funds under management and allocate those into Bitcoin, right? So we're seeing a slower trickle down into other asset classes like Solana. And I think that's why we have this discrepancy between the elites and the politicians that are trying to drive an agenda that is not in sync with, I think, the general mass population.
I have a few price predictions and so on that I want to get to in just a second, but one of the sort of leading voices in this discussion of Solana's push to have ETFs approved is, of course, Eric Balchunas, who's a Bitcoin ETF expert as well. One of his predictions was that by 2035, ETF inflows will reach around $35 trillion. But he also predicts that I think Bitcoin will capture about 80% of that market. So I just wanted to ask you how you think that will play out, and does that sort of breakdown make sense to you, or is it possible that Solana will capture a little bit more than what Eric Balchunas thinks?
The latter. I think Bitcoin will be an asset class. It will have high trading volumes, so that I agree with, but I don't see the inbound going 85% to Bitcoin alone. There's no activity, there's no transaction volume. I think the transaction volume is going to be on platforms like Solana.
Second spicy prediction. This one has a time frame attached to it as well. We spoke to a few actually, the three leading Solana Treasury vehicles, and one of them predicted that Solana could 5x by year end. What do we think about that?
Yeah, that's about right. $500, right? So $500 at the end of the year. I'm drinking that same Kool-Aid.
Final prediction that I want to get your quick thoughts on here. You and I have briefly discussed this in the past. It's whether or not Sol can flip Ethereum, and this also comes from one of the treasury vehicles that we've spoken to, where they think it is very, very possible that Sol flips Ethereum this cycle.
I don't know about that. I think what we will see is retail will go to Solana and institutions may go to Ethereum. Why? Because Ethereum just has longevity, has legacy with it, and has a lot of existing validation associated with it. However, the retail market where opportunities are going to be made will flow across into Solana. I think you'll see the Robin Hoods of the world focus on Solana, and I think you'll see the Morgan Stanleys of the world maybe be more dedicated to an Ethereum platform.
So what are the bull and bear cases here? Based on the takes that we just heard and what we know from the Canadian inflows and early BTC inflows, we can expect to see immense appetite for US ETFs, which include staking. Following approvals, we'd also likely see institutional treasury buys continuing. We would likely see more network growth from DEXs to PayFi and gaming, AI agents. Likely all of these areas would be thriving. Then, of course, there is the bear case. Assuming further SEC delays or restrictions on staking ETFs, or even externalities like macro headwinds, rising interest rates, and geopolitical risks, which could all be terrible and lead to people rotating out of risk assets more generally, meaning that crypto would of course see outflows due to some of that global uncertainty. But again, interestingly enough, despite some of these ongoing and seemingly escalating tensions in the Middle East, somehow Bitcoin ETFs still posted a $412 million inflow on Monday alone. That's certainly hinting that we could see crypto further decoupling from macro, at least with some of these global events. Okay, so we've seen how Bitcoin ETFs fueled massive inflows, how Canadian Solana ETFs proved demand and yield appetite, how treasury vehicles are stockpiling Sol with no end in sight, and why experts think a 5x is possible for Solana this cycle. But do you believe Sol can surge to a new all-time high on the back of a US ETF approval? If you want more data insights or analysis from across the Solana ecosystem, you can of course click the bell to get notified, and I'll see you next time for more of the very latest.